Hello everyone, my name is Aaron Kahn, Director of Tutoring here at Prepped and Polished, as well as Senior Tutor. Today we are going to be continuing our discussion on the grammar and English sections of the SAT Writing and Language and the ACT English sections. I hope you are all doing well today. Obviously we are still currently under quarantine, so I want to check in with each and every one of you. If you guys are dealing with any kind of difficulties with ACT or SAT test prep or even academic needs, please feel free to let us know. We are available, obviously online, to help you with any of your needs, whether that be, as I said, academic or standardized test prep. Today we're going to continue talking about grammar, specifically punctuation, grammar topics, and rhetoric. If you caught our live stream last week, we started talking about comma uses. We also talked about verb and pronoun agreement, as well as dealing with inserting, deleting, and replacing information. If you want to take a look, check out our website and also our YouTube page to look at that video. We also have a couple other streams that are happening. I believe yesterday Jackie gave a presentation as well, so if you guys are interested, please check out those videos on our website. Now, let's get into talking about ACT, SAT grammar rules that you must know, number 2. Now, when we talk about the ACT and SAT sections of the test, specifically dealing with the SAT Writing and Language and the ACT English, I always like to ensure that we are aware of those structural aspects of the ACT and SAT. Specifically, knowing the difference between the sections. Now, if you were at our live stream last week, you saw this slide already, but I'm here to toss it in there just so that you guys are well aware of it. If you're looking at the ACT English section, with standard time, it's 45 minutes with 75 questions spanning over 5 passages. Now, that comes out to be about 15 questions per passage and 9 minutes per passage if you have standard time. If any of you out there have extended time or certain timing accommodations, it will be a little bit different, so please feel free to let us know and we'll be happy to work on a strategic approach for that extended time. For the SAT, also known as the Writing and Language section, it is 35 minutes standard time for 44 questions over 4 passages. Comes out to be 11 questions per passage, and about 8 minutes and 45 seconds per passage in standard time. And my joke last time, I'll say it again because who doesn't like the same joke twice, is that 8 minutes and 45 seconds is really challenging to clock, to watch it on a clock. So usually I say take 8 minutes and 30 seconds per passage if you want to evenly distribute it, so that way you have a 1-minute grace period at the end of the test to either fill in your bubble sheet if you have any remaining bubbles to fill in, or take a look at some questions, pardon me, that you weren't 100% sure on. Now, let's start talking about some punctuation. And today we are going to be talking about some unique types of punctuation, specifically colons and dashes. Now, when we see colons and dashes on either test, some students feel a little bit confused. You've seen colons used before, but maybe you don't know exactly how they're supposed to be used. Well, that's what I'm here for. When we look at colons, colons are used for 2 things: lists and explanations, or adding some kind of emphasis. The one thing, though, that many students forget is that prior to having a colon used, you need to have an independent clause beforehand that can stand on its own. And we'll talk about this with a couple of our examples. You need to make sure that you're able to leave the sentence as is and then add on the colon. My apologies. Now, if we're talking about dashes, dashes have 2 functions, though I like to say 3, and those are lists and explanations or emphasis, which sounds like we were just talking about colons. And that's the case here, is that in some instances, when a dash is being used for a list or an explanation or emphasis, that's the same as a colon. So if you're keeping an eye out for when dashes are being used, this is a really helpful way to remember it. Also, in my opinion, easy way to memorize colons by just memorizing dashes. The next function of a dash is when you have a set of dashes, it acts the same way as a set of commas. And we have a set of commas, if you were in on last week's live stream or if you've watched the video, that's when we have it act as a non-essential clause. So my joke is a set of dashes equals set of commas, no dash comma, no comma dash. They don't really, on either the ACT or SAT, like hybrids or inconsistencies. They love their parallel structure. That's why it's a set. Now, I'm going to pause here. If anyone has any questions, I'm taking a look at our chat system. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask now about colons and dashes before we get into those example problems. Okay, I don't see any questions yet, but feel free to ask any questions in the chat feature of the live stream. Happy to answer them. There is a little bit of a delay, so if I don't answer them right away, that's the only reason. So let's take a look at some examples. Specifically, colons when we use them for lists. Here's an ACT example. There are too many online streaming platforms available. Disney+, Hulu, Amazon Prime, and Netflix. Now, when we're looking at this question here, I always try and identify what are my punctuation options. I have a colon, I have a semicolon in B, I have a comma in C, and I have nothing in D. So my question is always, which one is the most correct? Well, there are too many online streaming platforms available. Can that stand on its own? Yes. So, what comes after? A list. Colon option is the best choice here. Let's look at an SAT example. We need to purchase several essential items from Amazon this week. As you can see, there's a little bit of a trend here with Amazon. I need to purchase several essential items from Amazon this week, including flashlights, extra batteries, gloves, and cereal. Now, I don't know if any of you are dealing with this right now with the quarantine, but it's very difficult to get grocery items or even essential items delivered from any kind of service. So hopefully I get those batteries and the cereal. Definitely need that. For looking at my answers, though, I have a couple of options. The underlined portion has a colon. Answer B has nothing. C has a dash. D has a comma. Now, a lot of you are thinking, well, Aaron, there's a list. Obviously, we need a colon. But if I did that, we need to purchase several essential items from Amazon this week, including flashlights, extra batteries, gloves, and cereal. That including is a little bit different if you look at the ACT example. And the reason for that is including creates an awkwardness when associated with a colon. So in actuality here, we need something that does not do that. Also, another hint, if we look at the difference between answers A and answers C, what is the difference here? There is no difference. So if A and C are the exact same, neither one can be correct. So the answer here is actually D. Now by putting in a comma after week, if you were here last week, you would know commas are used for independent and dependent clause connections. Everything after week has to be dependent, well, including flashlights, extra batteries, gloves, and cereal. That is an dependent clause, so it works. All right, any questions on these? Looking at our chat feature, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask. Don't see anything. Okay, let's move on. Now, colons. Colons, again, we use those for lists. Now we're using them, though, for explanations. So if I think about a list can't really stand on its own. But an explanation can. And typically, explanations have a subject and conjugated verb with them. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. Now, I'm afraid of the ocean for one major reason. Sharks inhabit the depths of the oceans. Now, I don't know about you guys, I am deathly afraid of sharks. I'm fine with watching them on movies, TV shows, and Shark Week. But in the real world, they terrify me. So if I'm looking at this, I'm afraid of the ocean for one major reason. Well, I have my subject, I have my conjugated verb, I have the structure of the sentence. Great. What comes after? Well, I have a semicolon. Sharks inhabit the depths of the oceans. Okay. I have a colon. Sharks inhabit the depths of the oceans. I have a period. Sharks inhabit the depths of the oceans. Or I have no punctuation at all. Given this, I think our only answer choice that would work, because a semicolon is used between two independent clauses, and so is a period, A and C are out, I'm only left with one real answer choice, and you guys probably guessed it, colon. Now, usually, if I have a situation where I have two independent clauses, ideally I'd like to use a semicolon or period. However, I have to read that sentence because sharks inhabit the depths of the oceans explains why I'm afraid of the ocean, hence why the colon works. Now, whenever I go to the Louvre, I always enjoy viewing my favorite and most famous painting of its kind, the Mona Lisa. Now, I have a couple of options here, and I can tell that I'm in a little bit of a pickle. Because if I look at answer A and B, they both have colons here. Now, this is the SAT style in a nutshell. They like to add additional errors sometimes when you're reading a question or an underlined portion. So if we look at A and B, the difference is not necessarily the colon, but it's ITS versus IT apostrophe S. Now, in another live stream, we're going to be talking about apostrophe usage, but here B is saying it is. Now, is it the most famous painting of it is kind? I don't think so. Because of that identification, I can get rid of B and D immediately. Now, between A and C, we're into the same issue. We have a colon, we have a semicolon. Now, if a semicolon is supposed to be used between two independent clauses, my question is easy. Is the Mona Lisa an independent clause? It's not. So we have to go with a colon here. Now, again, when we have explanations, I always want to double check to make sure, does it work? Is this an explanation? And then, is this an independent clause? Because if it's not, colons won't work here. I'm going to just take a look at our chat feature, see if we have any questions. Don't believe so. Let's take a look at the next set of examples. Now we're talking about dashes. Now again, some of you might not be as familiar with dashes, and that's okay. The good news is that when you are taking either the ACT or SAT tests, it is easy to identify when dashes are being used. How so? Well, if we take a look at this, let's agree on the next steps. They are make a plan, divide the work, and complete the assignment. Seems pretty direct. Now, I know for a lot of you, you are dealing with online classes in some capacity, so I'm sure that making a plan, dividing the work, well, it might not be easy, but completing the assignment is essential, even if you guys have a pass-fail system at your school. It is very important to still complete the assignment and do it well. Now, if I look at my options here, I have a semicolon as no change, a period as no change, a dash, and then a comma. Now, immediately I'm going to take a look at A and B. Lo and behold, they are doing the same thing, which more than likely means they're not going to work as my answer choices. Well, then I look at C and D. Now, D has a comma. And I know with comma usage, I need it between an independent and a dependent clause, so let's take a look. Let's agree on the next steps. That is actually a fully fleshed out sentence. So we have an independent clause there. They are make a plan, divide the work, and complete the assignment. That's also an independent clause. That comma will not work here. So we're only left with one answer choice, C. Now, another nice thing about answer C is that it cuts out a little bit of extra words. They are, which we're going to be talking about later today, about shorter is better. But this is a great way to anticipate how this question is going to go. Let's look at an SAT example. Pardon me. The best way to make scrambled eggs, in my opinion, includes using several unique ingredients: almond milk, garlic salt, Tabasco, and chili powder. Now, I don't know about all of you guys, but I don't really use chili powder that often, but sometimes a little bit of Tabasco can make it wonderful. Now, if I'm looking at my answer choices here, I have no punctuation between ingredients and almond milk, a dash between ingredients and almond milk, a comma, or a dash again, but now we've added in including. Now, if you think back about before when we were talking about lists with colons, that word including really makes it awkward if we have it. So immediately I'm getting rid of D. Now, looking between A and C and B, I'm noticing in A, no punctuation. Got to be careful of that. Because if I have a list, it doesn't make sense to not have a colon here. Well, it doesn't. Because now we don't know that if we were setting off a list, we need a colon or a dash. But if I look at C, I have a comma. Well, that gets a little bit confusing. Why is the comma there? It doesn't work the way we'd like it to. Which means, apologies, our only answer choice that works here is B. And that dash sets off the list. Okay, let's take a look at dashes in terms of explanations. Before we do that, I'm just going to take a look to see if anyone has any questions. Don't see any right now. I'll give it a moment in case you guys are thinking of some. Okay, now let's take a look at an example of dashes used for explanations on the ACT. Now, to improve their health, Americans should critically examine the foods that they eat. Fast food, fatty fried foods, junk food, and sugary snacks are not healthy options. I would agree with that on all accounts. Especially with everything going on in the world, health is a priority for everyone, so we can do our part. Now, I have the option of they eat dash fast food, they eat, no punctuation, fast food, they eat colon such as, they eat semicolon fast food. We have a little bit of an issue here because I have a dash and I have a colon. But here's the thing, C has another answer choice. The words in this answer choice create an awkward phrase, such as. Such as is a lot like including. It creates a dependent clause, and we can't have that there, so I can't go with answer C. B, there's no punctuation, which makes this a very, very lengthy sentence and actually creates a run-on. So we cannot have that be the answer. Now between A and D, well, D has a semicolon, but fast food, fatty fried foods, junk food, and sugar snacks are not healthy options. Yes, that's a sentence, but it's an explanation of the previous, of the foods that we should be examining and what we should eat, or in this case, not eat. So therefore, my answer has to be A. Now, let's look at an SAT example. Now, this is Leonard Nimoy, commonly known as the actor who played Spock in the original Star Trek, reprised his role one final time in 2014 Star Trek Into the Darkness. Now, I don't know if any of you have seen the original Star Trek. I highly recommend it. There's a lot of time to watch television shows and movies during this quarantine time. So if you have some time, feel free to watch it. There's amazing, amazing varieties of this show, including Star Trek Enterprise and Star Trek Voyager. So you have some time to sit down, relax, and watch this. Let's get back to this question. He reprised his role one final time in 2014. No punctuation, Star Trek. Okay. In 2014, period, Star Trek. In 2014, comma, Star Trek. Or in 2014, dash, Star Trek. Well, he reprised his role one more time in 2014. What was that time? Or what was that role? What was the name of the film? That helps us eliminate B and A. B separates the two sentences. It just doesn't work. Now, if I'm looking at my other answer choices here, C and D. Well, comma might be a good option. It does connect a dependent clause, Star Trek Into Darkness, to an independent clause. However, we're explaining here. So the answer actually is D. Now, I know a lot of you might have thought C would have been a good option, but sometimes we have to consider, again, what is the sentence telling us? Because that might give us a little bit of a hint. All right, let's take a look at some dashes in terms of non-essential clauses. And before we move on, I'm just going to take a look to see if anyone has any questions so far. I don't see any questions, so let's take a look at non-essential clauses. Now, an ACT problem. Mary, comma, Queen of Scots, comma, who was also a French queen, dash, was cousin to Elizabeth I of England. Okay, now this is, in my opinion, an easy pickup. Why? Well, there's already a dash being used. So I am very careful of why there is a dash. Not in the underlined portion, but in the ununderlined portion. That should be, for you guys, everyone out there, your hint. Now, if I'm looking at that, I immediately zero in on B. B has another dash. So why would I have a set of dashes? As we talked, non-essential clauses. Well, if it's a non-essential clause, I can take it out. So Mary, Queen of Scots, was cousin to Elizabeth I of England. That is a sentence. And we're losing the fact that she was a French queen, but I feel like we still have the main structure of the sentence. But let's double check. Well, A, those commas around Queen of Scots suggest that Queen of Scots is not essential. So Mary, who was also a French queen, dash, was cousin to Elizabeth I of England. I feel like I'm separating my subject, Mary, Queen of Scots, or Mary, from its conjugated verb. So I don't think that will work. Let's look at C, no punctuation. Well, then that suggests that the dash is either setting off an explanation or setting off a list, and it's doing neither. Finally, we have D, a comma after Mary, which suggests Queen of Scots, who was also a French queen. Are we trying to create a non-essential clause here? I don't think so. Let's double check to see if I was right. Would you look at that? The answer is B. Now, let's look at an SAT problem. Ooh, now I don't know if any of you are Patriot fans out there, so this might hit a little too close to home, but Tom Brady, previously the quarterback of the New England Patriots, decided to, unfortunately, play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, this is a classic SAT problem where we have not one, but actually two non-essential clauses tossed in here. And in this case, the second non-essential clause, I'm kind of giving it away here, is the word unfortunately. Now we'll be talking about this word in a little bit, but unfortunately is considered a transitional word. And when it appears in the middle of a sentence, we have to create it as a non-essential transition. And in this case, we have a set of dashes around it. But notice how the dashes are placed. One is on the second line of the sentence, and the other is on the third line. Yes, that is an actual tactic that is sometimes used on the tests, so that you don't notice the first or sometimes the second dash. Now, if I'm looking at my answer choices here, I have no change to period, unfortunately, comma, to semicolon, unfortunately, comma, or to, oh, looks like there's a little bit of a typo there, comma, unfortunately. Now, that's an issue in my book. I can't go with B or C because they're the same thing. Period and a semicolon, same thing. But if I'm looking between A and D then, and if we ignore the typo of the I, why is there just a comma there? Well, if we look back at the sentence, there's a bunch of commas already used immediately after Tom Brady and immediately after Patriots. Is that comma trying to be used with the other ones? The answer here is actually no. It's a trap. So we got to be careful. The answer here, no change. Alrighty. Now, before we get into the next set of information, and this time we're going to be talking about grammar, does anyone have any questions about punctuation, specifically with colons and dashes? So I'm not seeing any questions, but I'll give it another moment. Okay, let's take a look at some transitions and relative pronouns. Now again, we're shifting out of punctuation, we're moving into grammar topics. So again, what matters here is noting what exactly is my sentence structure about. So then that way I can anticipate kind of what I'm trying to answer based on the information given. And when we talk about transitions, they are ways in which we provide a shift, or transitional shift, if you want to use the word in the definition, between the structure of a passage, paragraph, sentence, what have you. And typically we see those as such examples as in addition, however, or as a result. Now I have to pay attention to where they are, as well as what types there are. There are three types: contradictors, continuers, cause and effects. Now I've listed a couple of examples for contradictor, however, continuer, in addition, cause and effect, such as a result. Now all of these different types perform different functions. Specifically, a continuer continues on the main dialogue, or what we're talking about. Contradictor, well, it goes against or goes in a different direction. And cause and effect, well, cause and effect. It's showing the result or what happens. The other thing to keep in mind is the location. Typically, they appear within a sentence, in between sentences, or in between paragraphs. So I should be able to note them and see them when they show up. I always got to keep an eye out for that. The other one that we're going to be talking about today are relative pronouns, specifically who versus whom. Now, I don't know about all of you guys, but sometimes when we're listening to people talk, we incorrectly use who and whom in our daily conversation. I'm here to tell you a few things. One, I'm not trying to correct the way in which you talk, but I can help you with the way you write. And that's how the ACT and SAT approach these topics. It's really how they are supposed to be used in written language. When we speak, we might not necessarily use them correctly, but if you do, kudos and well done. Now, what are relative pronouns? Well, there's some type of pronoun. And when we talked last week, we talked about how pronouns are used to replace nouns. These are the same. Ironically, a lot of types of relative pronouns are considered what we call W words, and they're typically used with dependent clauses or sometimes essential or non-essential clauses. Now, the two we're talking about today are who v. whom. Who is supposed to be used as the subject of the sentence, and whom is supposed to be used as the object of the sentence. Now, the subject of the sentence is always used with a verb and typically conjugates the verb. So, he is great. Who is great? For an object, it's always associated with a preposition. Now, preposition is something like the word to or at. So, I ran to him. I ran to whom? Each of these cases, I am using who and whom correctly as either subject or object, respectively. Now, let's take a look at some questions, but some example questions. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to type it in the chat. Don't see any questions. Give it another moment. Okay. Let's take a look at some examples of different transitions. Now, there's a long-standing assumption that people from Wisconsin and Minnesota can stand the cold weather year-round. In contrast, they are found to wear shorts and a t-shirt in negative 25-degree weather. Now, I don't know about you guys, I'm originally from Wisconsin, and I lived in Minnesota for a very long period of time. So I don't take offense to this. However, I can understand the assumption. So if we're looking at this, I notice that I have year-round, period, in all my answer choices. Okay, what about the next word? Aha, we have a couple of differences. We have in contrast, likewise, for instance, and in conclusion. Now, if I'm trying to identify the different types, and this is something that can take a bit of time, when you first start out, I can note that in contrast, contradictor, likewise a continuer. For instance is another way of, a fancy way of saying for example, which is also a continuer. And in conclusion, that is also something could be considered a cause and effect, because you're showing in conclusion, you're showing the result. Now, if I'm trying to think about this strategically, what does this next sentence do? Well, it says that they are found to wear shorts and a t-shirt in negative 25-degree weather. Well, isn't that kind of going along with this assumption that they can stand the cold weather year-round? Exactly. So that's why the answer here is C, because we are giving an example. And again, when I'm working through this, I try and anticipate, well, what is this sentence doing? What is its function? Let's look at an SAT example. It is common to see a single deer while driving near a forest or even on a highway. Furthermore, you should always slow down and pay attention for any additional crossings. All right, now we have furthermore underlined, as a result, therefore, or delete the underlined portion. Now we're going to be talking about when we delete, why we delete, based on shorter is better. But if I'm looking at this, furthermore, as a result, therefore. Well, furthermore is adding on. It's a continuer. As a result, cause and effect. And therefore is also a cause and effect statement. Looking at my answer choices, well, am I saying that because it's common to see a deer, we should always look for any additional sightings? To see a common deer to additional sightings. Or additional crossings, my apologies. And I don't think so. I don't think that's what we're trying to say here. If that's the case, B and C being cause and effect, neither of them work. So we're left with A. Now, I'm going to take a moment to take a look at any questions that we might have in the chat before we talk about contradictors. Don't see any right now, so let's move on to some examples of contradictors. Now, there is no one food that you could eat for the rest of your life. However, I would choose potatoes. Personally, 1000% agree with this statement. Potatoes are a staple in my household because there are so many ways you can prepare them. Now, if I look at my answer choices, I have, however, as a result, thus, and for example. Now, if I'm looking at as a result and thus, those are both cause and effects. Well, is there a cause? There's no one food that you could eat for the rest of your life. And is there effect? I would choose potatoes. Well, didn't I just say there is no one food? And now I'm talking about I would choose potatoes? That seems to not go along with one another, or seems to kind of clash. And that's my hint. However, I'm not giving an example here, even though I am giving an example of choosing potatoes, but the example contradicts what's previously being stated. We have to be careful of that. All right, let's look at an SAT example. Whereas the usual time to eat lunch is around noon, Jacob decided to eat his lunch at 4:30 p.m. Wow, that's getting late, Jacob. You got to eat lunch earlier than that. Now here's the thing. We have whereas the, however, comma the, therefore, comma the, or just the. Now, you might say, oh, Aaron, we have two contradictors. Let's double check that. Probably not going to work, right? Let's take a look. If I ignore the transition, the usual time to eat lunch is around noon. Okay. Is what coming after a contradictor? Jacob decided to eat his lunch at 4:30. Yes. But, which answer do we choose here? A or B? This is a common question that can show up for the SAT a lot of the times, and students sometimes get really confused as to which one is actually more correct. Here's the thing. I look at the whole sentence. So why is that comma after the word noon? Well, if I said, however, comma, the usual time to eat lunch is around noon, that's an independent clause. Which means if I have a comma after my independent clause, I should have a dependent clause following. Jacob decided to eat his lunch at 4:30 p.m. Uh-oh. That is not a dependent clause. So, answer has to be A. Whereas is known as that linking word that kind of creates a dependent clause, and we need contrast, which is another reason why D does not work. Even though it gets rid of the transition and makes it shorter, it's not what we want. All right, let's move on to some cause and effect questions. Now, some people believe the quote, cogito ergo sum, or I think however I am, is from Shakespeare, but it is actually from René Descartes, a famous French philosopher. Now, I don't know if any of you out there have ever studied Latin or read about René Descartes and his work, so you might be able to get this answer strictly on outside knowledge, but let's take a look at this. Think, comma, however, think, comma, therefore, think, comma, that is, or think, comma, also. Well, if I'm thinking, however I am I trying to draw contrast here? I don't think so. I think, therefore I am. Well, if you're thinking, is the effect that you are actually there, person. I know this is very philosophical. We don't need to have a philosophy talk today, folks, but maybe in another live stream we can talk about philosophy. But I believe that is cause and effect. But let's take a look at the other answer choices. That is, well, that is suggesting a definition. Or defining who I am based on how I think that's a little bit confusing. Also, if we're looking at D, ironically also, I think also I am. Well, are we adding on to the same line of reasoning? No. So the answer here has to be B. And again, I know some of you might have heard of this quote before, in which case, well done. Not everyone has heard of it, though, so it's a good way to kind of practice it. Now, let's take a look at an SAT example. There are typically very few stars that are visible in the city. However, most city dwellers will have to travel far outside the city to get a clear sight of the constellations such as Orion and Capricorn. Now, this is a very lengthy sentence, well, two sentences, And this is very much SAT style. They're going to try and confuse you with multiple topics being talked about between sentences. But if I'm looking at this, I have however, in addition, consequently, and nevertheless. Okay, right off the bat, I note that A and D are contradictors. So I ask myself, am I contradicting this statement? Well, not really. Okay, if that's the case, then I get rid of A and D. Then I look at B and C. Well, in addition suggests that we're adding on to this. And are we adding on to the few stars that are visible in the city? No. And then that leaves us only with consequently. And consequently means because of this, or as a result. And that's my answer. Because I am saying because we cannot see, or because people cannot see stars in the city, they have to travel far outside the city to be able to see those constellations and stars. Okay. Let's take a look at some relative pronouns, who versus whom. These ones can actually go pretty quickly if we're keeping in mind who is a subject and whom is an object. Let's take a look at an example. The importance of good manners is for everyone who wants to make a positive impression on others. Okay, well, the importance of good manners is for everyone he or she wants to make a positive impression on others. The importance of good manners is for everyone they want or whom wants. I almost caught myself there. Now, if I'm reading this, automatically thinking, oh, whom? Does whom come before a verb? No. So get rid of D. The next two that I get rid of are actually I get rid of one right off the bat, C. Because we're talking about everyone, which is actually singular. It's what's called a group pronoun. That doesn't work. And then in between A and B. Now with B, I have he or she wants to make a positive impression on others. Yes, that sounds great. But we have everything before it. The importance of good manners is for everyone he or she wants to make a positive impression on others. Oof. That sounds complicated and also incorrect. Our answer, A. We have our subject, everyone. We have our object, in this case, not our object, sorry, our subject, who, which references everyone, and we have who wants to make a positive impression. Let's look at an SAT example. Hospitals have been working tirelessly to help those people in need, and the staff at these centers are true heroes. These heroes work tirelessly, as I said before, and deserve recognition for their hard work and sacrifices. Now, I have heroes, period, these heroes, comma, they, heroes, comma, which, or heroes, comma, who. Now, if I'm talking about heroes, I'm talking about people, which actually, talk about this in another live stream, eliminates the answer which, because we're talking about people. If I look at B, I don't like the fact that I have they work tirelessly and deserve recognition, because that's an independent clause. And that comma after heroes, that doesn't work. Which leaves me with either A or D. Now, A, in the real world, you could probably get away with. But on the SAT, no. They want concision, or being concise, in which case D is our answer, because we're referencing those people who are working, the staff in the hospitals. All right, let's look at one more example of who v whom. For the ACT, a typical letter to a college or university starts with the phrase, to who it may concern. Now again, I'm using a quote here, and some of you might have even used this in mock letters to colleges and universities. In this case, to is an example of our prepositions. So, to does not go with who. So get rid of A. I can also get rid of C, because in is another example of a preposition. Which leaves me with A and D. The issue that we have here is to understand, well, do I need to whom, or can whom stand on its own? Here's the kicker. Whom cannot stand on its own. So I have to unfortunately get rid of D. Therefore, the answer has to be B, to whom it may concern. Let's look at another example, this time from the SAT. When my parents ask me, who did you go out with tonight? I always answer, with whom did I go out last night? Now, I don't recommend any of you to say this to your parents. It might seem a little bit rude, but it is correct grammar. I cannot fault you there. Well, let's look at our answers. So to whom, or with whom did I go out with last night? With who did I go out with last night? With whose did I go out with last night? Or with which did I go out last night? Oh my. A lot of W words here. But with is a preposition. That's all I need. Has to be answer A. Now, before we get into the next topic here, we're going to take a look at our live stream, see if anyone has any questions about relative pronouns and transitions before we get into rhetoric. All right, I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm going to move on to talking about rhetoric. Shorter is better, also known as concision. Great word. So what happens when each answer choice is literally saying the same thing? Now, this can be really trippy for a lot of students, and so I always say, the second I start reading it, I'm like, each answer sounds exactly like the previous one, or they all sound the same. I'm looking to see, well, which one says it best, or which one is shortest. Now, I reiterate this by saying, well, what is the author trying to say? If I can reiterate what the author is saying, which one says it best, and which one says it most concisely, or direct and to the point. And there are a couple of examples of ways in which shorter is better comes up. First one is wordiness. If you guys have been listening to the previous live stream, as well as any of our podcasts, if I'm ever on, I am extremely wordy with how I speak. It is something that I'm constantly working on. But when it comes to either the SAT or the ACT, I flip the switch in my brain and I am very concise. So when I look at wordiness, less words equals more correct. And this is on the test. In the real world, you could get away with being wordy. But again, I want to be thinking about directness and being concise. Redundancy. When you say the same thing twice, or when saying the same thing twice. So if I ever see redundancy happening, it's when there's a repetition of either words or phrases on the test. So I have to be careful of that, which means I have to be paying attention to what's previously been stated to avoid that slip up. And finally, passive voice. Now this is when we have our subject and object in the sentence, they're swapped. Now sometimes people believe passive voice is when you talk in the past tense, but not really. It's obviously, yes, in the past tense, but it's more like our subject and object are doing the wrong thing. So it's usually subject followed then by the verb and then the object. In this case, though, object and subject are flipped. Another way to think about this is a fun way is X does Y versus Y is done by X. And if you see that, notice how many extra words I have in there. This is why passive voice is considered incorrect, because it uses up too many extra words. Let's take a look at a couple examples. All right, the mountain was treacherous for even the most experienced mountain climber. However, we were able to traverse the trail, but we did fall as we hiked for hours and hours going up the mountain. Now, I can keep it as is. I have, though we did stumble and slip the entire way up. Stumbling and slipping. or scrambling up the mountainside over the course of our journey to the top. Notice how in a lot of these, a lot of words, my immediate attention is drawn to answer C. Why? Well, shorter is better, right? If I were to say, however, we were able to traverse the trail, stumbling and slipping. Yeah, that gets the point across. Answer choice C is correct. Now, again, I'm cutting out part of this passage to understand what I need to be paying attention to. So when you see something like this, always be aware of the context. Context is king here. So we got to be careful. All right, let's look at an SAT example. In the name of science, it is typical for any experiment to have a focus on either establishing a new theory or generating a way in which one may challenge the previously held assumption about the topic at hand. That sounds very fancy the way you say it like that. But is there a better way? What is the author trying to say? Well, I could say, or creating an original idea for the study, or develop a conflicting theory with which the original experiment had in the first place, or delete the underlined portion and place a period at the end of the sentence. Now, careful. Usually when we talk about wordiness, we want to just get rid of the extra material, right? But if we got rid of that, I would have, in the name of science, it is typical for any experiment to have a focus on either establishing a new theory. Yeah, that sounds like we're missing something, guys. So I can't go with D. Then between A, B, and C, well, B does look shorter. Focus on either establishing a new theory or creating an original idea for the study. Well, that's what the author's talking about here. We're just trying to create a new, or in this case, original idea. B is correct. All right, let's look at redundancy. So, it is hard to believe that registered nurses, or also known as RNs, are only paid annually $50,000 a year, given the fact that they are instrumental in the healthcare industry. Now, if I look at the underlined portion, only a year, B, per year, C, every year. They literally all sound the same. That should be my indicator. Take a look at the sentence. Annually. Now, annually means each year, or per year, or every year, or a year. So in actuality here, that's right. Delete the underlined portion. We don't need it. Let's look at an SAT example. While it is important to get a sufficient amount of sleep each night, and one should be mindful to not oversleep, especially when it is 2 days prior to an important event. Well, I have and, but, or for, and I have a comma right before it. Well, comma fanboys, but which one is more correct? Here's the thing. While it is important to get a sufficient amount of sleep each night, that can't stand on its own, which means we can't put comma and, or comma but, or even comma for, which in my opinion is a very unused comma fanboys conjunction. So, ironically, it is answer D again. All right, let's look at some last examples here on passive voice. Now remember, passive voice is when we flip-flop something active versus something passive. So, this year has not been kind to Andre. Order and luxury were two of the most important constants in this movie star's life. Now he has no money, and few movie studios will hire him because of his abysmal performances in recent films. Well, I have order and luxury were two of the most important constants in this movie star's life. The movie star had order and luxury throughout his life. Luxury and order were a necessity for him. Without luxury and order, there would be difficulties for the movie. Movie star. Whew, you can tell that it's a lot of words being used here. Well, what is my subject and what is my object? Based on this sentence, it seems like it's the movie star, right, Andre? Well, if we're looking at this, the only one that has the movie star doing any kind of action is B. I like these questions. Sometimes it's very obvious once you read the context what the correct answer is. Now, let's do one more example before we wrap up today. An SAT example. The essay was due today at 12 o'clock p.m. Oh no, that's in 5 minutes. But I told my teacher that my homework was stolen by ninjas. Interesting. I don't think that she really believed me, but it happened. Okay, so I have comma but throughout all these. So I have comma and for D. Interesting. I told my teacher that my homework was stolen by ninjas. I was told that ninjas stole my homework. I told my teacher that ninjas stole my homework, or I told my teacher that ninjas stole my homework. Well, we have a couple of options here, and I want to make sure that I have correct usage of my subject. Well, I told my teachers is pretty much a given. So that gets me down to C and D. Now, you could argue that the comma and here is the only difference. Well, if we're looking at this, that's right. Comma and does not work here as part of this sentence structure. Now, guys, thank you for joining me today. I know it was a lengthy one, so I appreciate all of you guys diligently following along. If you have any questions about live stream today, please feel free to contact us. We will probably be doing another SAT, ACT tips, tricks, and strategies. Times to be determined, but make sure you subscribe and click the bell notification to follow along on our YouTube channel so that when we schedule it, you can get that information and set a reminder for yourself. And if you're looking for more individualized one-on-one tutoring, please feel to contact us. Check out our website, www.preptandpolished.com. There's a chat feature on our website that we can talk to you about. Or feel free to call us at 781-753-9951, and we can talk to you on the phone or talk to your parents about setting you up for tutoring. And also, we have a podcast. Just feel free to search the Prepped and Polished podcast for more information and more strategies, tricks, tips, and the like. Now, as I finish up today, I just want to say thank you all so much again for sticking with me for almost an hour. Really appreciate it. If you have any questions or if there's anything that we can do to help support you during this time, please do not hesitate to contact us. I'll be happy to set you up with a tutor for academic or test prep needs. So I'll end this out by saying please stay healthy, stay safe, and try and stay sane during this quarantine time. Thanks so much.